I actually think, Tom, I'm braced for disappointment. I think it's going to be fairly underdramatic. You're right to pick up the whipping notice for Thursday. That suggests there might be some sort of rabbit in Rishi Sunak's hat. These budgets and mini budgets are now really a piece of magical theatre more than they're any sensible form of economics. So he'll try to hold something back. There hasn't been any real confirmation in the Sunday papers as to what the big statements would be. But here's my worry, Tom. I think he'll take a few steps to mitigate the cost of living crisis. We might see a reduction in fuel duty rather than just a freezing, for example. He might do a little on the income tax side. But I am expecting when Rishi Sunak sits down at about 1:30 on Wednesday afternoon, the tax burden will be pretty much as high as when he stood up at about 12:30 on Wednesday after Prime Minister's questions. And of course, there is a cost of living crisis, but we focus an awful lot on energy, food and inflation. The biggest cost of living for virtually every household in Britain is tax. You're handing over about a third of your money in tax. And I think that the Chancellor might trim that a little at the edges, but not as substantially as I would wish to see.
Of course, we're expecting that tax burden to rise to the highest it's been in over 50 years, mainly due to this national insurance rise that's coming in. Large speculation, despite pressure to scrap this rise, it's going ahead, but it may be tweaked, that the threshold by which it paid may rise, and so the lowest paid may be taken out of it. What's your assessment of that?
Yes, I think that probably he might do something, and I think a tweak is probably the right way to describe it, Tom. He and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak and the Prime Minister, have now invested such political capital in this that I think a U-turn is out of the question. But what he might do is to say, well, I'm taking with one hand, but I'm going to give back something with the other. That could either be changing the national insurance thresholds to protect some of the lower paid, or again, he might argue that he's going to do something on the income tax side of the ledger, which for certain demographics, certain people might offset the national insurance rise. I think for political reasons rather than sensible economic reasons, he needs to be seen to continue with that NIC's rise. It would almost look like political weakness if he now backed down, but he might find some way, either by tinkering with national insurance or by changing something on income tax to offset it or offset most of it. But as I said at the outset, Tom, I think this is going to be a kind of mitigation budget. There's going to be nothing particularly radical or special. We will hear again from the Chancellor that he is apparently in his heart a low-tax Conservative, but for reasons he needs to be behaving a bit more like a Corbynite high-tax, high-spend socialist. So tweaking and mitigation. But I'm afraid, Tom, if your viewers are hoping for some dramatic good news tomorrow lunchtime, I think they're unlikely to receive it.